नमस्ते, स्वागत है आपका इंडिया दिस वीक के नए एपिसोड में और मैं हूं आपकी होस्ट आमना अंसारी।
Hi, this is Khalid Beg, and welcome to yet another episode of India This Week. Today, we're joined by Avidas, who's a communication expert and also keeps an very, very keen eye on the strategic affairs of what happens in India. On social media, he's quite a known voice when it comes to the issues surrounding India, and his observations are mostly spot on and understanding the enemy designs, how they work around India, and how the geostrategic issues of India. Welcome, Avida.
Thank you, Amana. Thank you, Khalid. Thank you for
So,
having me in your talk show.
yeah, we're very excited to have you because so yours analysis and the observations are mostly spot on. So it's very exciting to understand what goes behind them. So today we want to talk about basically the last month's developments, which have not been good. There have been these attacks on religious processions in not one Indian state but across states. But if we were to start off and kick off the discussion with what happened a week back in Northwest Delhi's Jahangirpur area, where a religious procession came under attack from violent mobs, and it led to the mastermind of, now he's known across the net as Mohammad Ansar. Now, the fact is that when these intelligence agencies, crime branch, got into it, he's of course now in Delhi police custody, and when they tracked the wife, they are right now, the crime branch has gone to East Midnapur in Bengal, and now there are links emerging, via Bangladesh, and even the fact that they're saying Mohammad Ansar is from Bihar is again not sure. So again, the illegal immigration crisis, which gets spoken about a lot time to time, has resurfaced, and we can see that there's a pattern of illegal Bangladeshi criminal elements for fostering these issues, and once again we're back to square one. So Avida, starting from you, who keeps a keen eye on these issues, how do you view this, especially the Mohammad Ansar connection, who's a scrap dealer, a history sheeter? His name has come up, and now the whole thing of again the criminal elements from the infiltrators. And where does it all start from? If you could just tell us that where have we reached to such a stage that you have these substantial amount of population in every Indian city who at the spur of it again start these communal clashes? Over to you.
So I just wanted to clarify, so far as I know, the violence which was perpetrated in Delhi, they were mostly Rohingyas. Am I incorrect in that?
I mean, yeah, the reports are talking about illegal Bangladeshis. I mean, it's known as a hub of where even locals have complained about illegal Bangladeshi immigrants who usually they're talking to the clergy who come from outside.
Because I wouldn't like to conflate the two.
Sure.
Rohingya is an issue which is separate from Bangladeshi elements.
Right.
And insofar as your first declaration, which is that Ansar is the kingpin, he's definitely not the kingpin. Okay. He is at best a foot soldier. In mafioso term, you would call him a kind of a capo of sorts. So he is the fall guy. He is the person who on the ground has gone about recruiting people and getting the people together to do the stone belting part of it. But he's far from being the brains behind the operation, so as to speak. Okay. Now, if I could paraphrase the question which you placed to me, I think quintessentially what you would like to know is how big a danger is illegal immigration to India? Absolutely. Is that what you're trying to explore through this?
Yes.
Now, to be able to answer it, I would like to go over to something a little hackneyed, but a lot in parlance these days. People call it the demographic jihad.
Right.
Now, I wouldn't like to call it a demographic jihad per se, because the thing is that people derive their own connotation in terms of what this means. Okay. I would rather call it as demographic warfare. Okay. Now, why I call it demographic warfare as against pure immigration is because the fact that we should have a way by which we can differentiate between economic immigration, which takes place in a country, and demographic warfare. Right? True. Economic immigration is a natural osmosis which happens. Economic immigration is something whenever if you have, it is like, water moves from higher potential energy to lower potential energy. Right. Similarly, over here, if you have a better economic situation, irrespective of the border or something like that, people will move from where there's lower economic well-being to a place which is of higher economic well-being. Instead of, because it becomes a little problematic to see it purely in terms of Indian terms. Let's see if that this applies in any other part of the globe, right? So instead of, and not keeping it restricted to religious issues, because when I say jihad, it directly kind of connotes with Islamic movement in some ways, right? So whether I can qualify that or not, we'll come to this later. Let's first explore the principle behind it and we'll see whether or not this applies at any other place. Now, we have heard of all this because thanks to Trump, we have heard of the Trump's wall, etc., and things like that. So we realize that there is a similar issue which is happening between Mexico and US, right? Now, Mexico and US for a very long time, and Mexico and US is in some ways very similar to what is happening with Bengal, because that part of southern US used to at one point of time be a part of Mexico, which the US won over, etc., things like that. So that means there has been an amount of local population who have been separated from similar population by an artificial border which has been placed, right? Now, we have known of economic immigration happening through Mexico for a very long period of time. So at what point of time would this economic immigration be termed as warfare? Now, to arrive upon that, let us first define warfare. Warfare to me is a protracted activity which is taking place against any particular collective or community with the intention of either subverting the system or building hegemony on top of them, leading to control over whether it is thought, resources, etc., things like that. That to me is a warfare.
Right.
It is something which happens by design. It is something which is sequential and will have a lot of stages involved in it. It is something which is a means to a very specific end.
Right.
That is warfare. Right. Now, if we were to look upon Mexico, when would we say that, this is an immigration which is happening, but this is warfare which is happening? Let us say, if you must have all, thanks to Netflix, most of you hopefully would have seen the Narcos series, right? So let us imagine that they are cartels, they are drug cartels. Now, these drug cartels makes this movement of people as their exclusive domain. They say that only those whom we will allow will go into US and those whom we don't allow will not go into US. Right. So they become the unofficial visa agency, let's say. Next, they'll say that those whom we are sending, you will have to do as per our bidding. You will have to move drugs on our behalf and you will have to reach drugs to our distributors, etc., on our behalf, and essentially be an extension of us. Towards that, they hold their papers, etc., and things like that to maintain control over these people's life. Right. Then they facilitate their movement within the country. After they are facilitated, then these people become the drug pushers, the drug peddlers, etc., and they become a source of revenue for this agency. Okay. And at the same time, they're subverting the system. Right? Now, while they're subverting the system, since there are pockets of population who are coming up, so as to facilitate their operation, they say that, okay, fine, we will also get you to vote on our behalf. That means you will utilize the democratic process which is over there to facilitate our processes. That means you will make issues, the law issues weaker. You will bring down the activities of the law agencies. You will facilitate those who overlook the activity which we are doing. Essentially, they build up an hegemony over the e-commerce also. So in this whole process, you see that this isn't a simple question of economic migration which has happened. It's a question of subverting the system which is already existing in that country.
Right.
At this point of time, would you term it as mere economic immigration or would you term it as a warfare of sorts?
Right.
How would you term it?
Right.
Common sensely?
No, of course, the patterns do show that. It's like where you're using democracy against
As a warfare,
following
right?
it up. Yeah.
Now, the best way to subvert democracy is through demographics. Because that is the most telling weapon which can be utilized in democracy.
Right.
Now, how would you, coming back to what is happening over here in India, coming back to that, we see that we have already experienced in a short history, we have already started off with being partitioned on the basis of belief demographics, right? So there is something which is to show that, you know, a particular ideology would exercise its means to wrest chunks of area on the basis of ideology. So that basis has been established, right? Now, are they capable of doing it once more? Now, coming back to the East, coming back to the Bangladeshis and the Rohingyas, see, the Rohingyas are not the same as Bangladeshis. Okay. Though they fall in a tract which is, if you all remember the map of Bangladesh, to me, the map of Bangladesh kind of reminds me of Tintin's Snowy.
Right.
So there's like kind of dog's head, and there's one hand which is keeping on his waist, and with the other hand, he's pointing towards, you know, in a direction which is to the east of India.
Right.
Right. But where the tail of it goes, the southern eastmost tip of Bangladesh, extending beyond that is that area where the Rohingyas live.
Right.
Now, pre-independence, the Rohingyas were known as Mogs. They were called Mogs. They were fantastic cooks, but they were also great pirates. They used to, I know of all this because my grandfather used to be with the police stationed in Dhaka.
Okay.
And he has fought with a number of these pirates. They were always lawless. In their history, they were something that they look upon themselves as people who are direct Arabian settlers who had come and settled over there. And they were wooed by the British to act against the Japanese. So they were provided with a lot of arms and ammunition during the Second World War. That's how they turned militant. They were hoping to join with Pakistan. The British, like the Western powers, like the way they are dealing with the YKK in Turkey, etc. They have the Peshmergas in Turkey. Similarly, these guys were left and cut off and left with Burma.
Okay.
Now, they have remained militant over there all along.
Okay.
In the recent course of event, with the last which we heard of, Rohingyas beaten out and all that, what had happened was they had become, see, again, history, I'm deviating a little over here, but in terms of Burma is cut into kind of two, thanks to the same hill tract which runs around the Naga Hills. So that hill goes all the way to the Irrawaddy Delta. East of the Irrawaddy, east of those hills is more or less under Burmese control. West, the Arakan Valley, they fall with the Arakans and the Mogs, the Rohingyas, all right. And that area is not completely lawed. It's a bit of a lawless area because the Myanmarese army don't come up from the hill across that much. Something which like Kashmir Valley is, let's say, if the Indian army was there, all right. So over here, what the Rohingyas did was that they first committed massacre on the local Hindu populace.
Okay.
And then they went and hit on 3-4 military posts, and they killed all the people who were in the posts.
Okay.
So this was like a full-blown rebellion which they started. on which the Burmese army launched an operation against them.
Okay.
So the Western press picked up from the point the Burmese army launched the operation. They didn't go into the history of why the Burmese army have launched the operation, etc., things like that. That displaced some of them. Some of these Rohingyas were then brought over and settled in India. How they settled in India is again a matter of another story. We will not go into that for right now. Now, coming to the Bangladeshis, the Bangladeshi issue or the Bangladeshi crisis, this is something which ideally should make episode onto itself. I will just touch upon it briefly. Bangladeshis were facilitated to coming into, you have heard of Lachit Barphukan?
What is that?
Lachit Barphukan is the Assamese general. He was known as a freedom fighter over there. He took on the Mughal army. Okay. So since the Mughal times, they have been wanting to expand into the Brahmaputra basin.
Okay.
Which is the Muslim Bengalis have been wanting to move on to the Brahmaputra basin. Because of population pressure, they would like to go in over there, and they were not allowed to do that by Barphukan, and they were pushed out. Okay. But that tussle has always remained. What happened was various first Congress in Assam, they started settling these Bangladeshi Muslims with the idea that you are going to be our vote bank. Okay. As long as you vote for us, we'll allow you to stay. And that's how the shift of Congress towards addressing Islamic interests started happening from this point on. Okay. The same kind of story was repeated in Bengal by the communists, and they said that, okay, fine, you all come. Earlier, we have seen various waves of immigration coming in from East Bengal, which are mostly Hindus, which are being displaced over there because of violence which was being perpetrated over there. Whatever you can think in terms of Kashmir files, whatever you can think in terms of what has happened with Kashmiri Pandit, that has been visited in a much mega scale to Bengali Hindus who stayed back in Eastern Bengal, towards Eastern Bengal or East Pakistan or Bangladesh, right? They had been coming. But now because of economic compulsions, India was doing better than Bangladesh. A lot of these people started coming in also. What the communists said, okay, fine, you also come, we'll settle you in, but the condition is you vote for us. They said, fine, we'll vote for you. Cut to now, that thing is still happening. But a few things else extra has happened. What has happened is the Jamaat has taken over control of this facilitation of bringing the people in across from Bangladesh. So you can come in exclusively only through the Jamaat. Okay. Now, obviously the Jamaat, this, by the way, again, I'm kind of jumping topics over here, but this mechanism was instituted by the Turks first. The Turks used their variety of mosques in Germany to help move Turks into Germany. I mean, it's through a variety of reasons as to how Erdogan has come into power. Okay. Now, the Turks taught the Sikhs these mechanics. So the Sikhs are using the Gurdwara to facilitate movement from India to Canada, right, provided you do as per how they ask you to do.
Right.
Right. So in Canada, so far, it hasn't converted itself into an demographic warfare yet. That depends upon what kind of population. But the mechanism is there that, okay, fine, I'll help you move, I'll help you stay, I'll help you settle in over there, as long as you become, in some ways, a slave to my system and my ideology. Right. The same thing is happening over here in Bengal. All right. And this affects the whole of Northeast. How it affects the whole of Northeast is best possibly a separate episode, right, as to the mechanics which goes into it. I won't go into it. But right now, this demographic warfare, I mean, settling people who are ideologically Muslim and who will vote for Muslim cause and work on Muslim causes in pockets in various areas within the country. is demographic warfare. The demographic warfare also has various other components, something which people term as the love jihad, but it's in some ways a kind of an occupation of wombs. Okay, I'm using strong words over here. Forgive me for that, but possibly that needs to be more explored and qualified. Second part of it is they have a population in pushing population, greater number of population across. So that is the other aspect of it. The third aspect about it is this settlement of people in ghettos. And there are 4-5 other strategies by which demographic imposition is facilitated. And because this warfare is conducted purely for facilitating Islamic issues, is why I'm calling it a jihad, because a warfare which is conducted on behalf of Islam is generally called a jihad.
Right.
Right.
Okay.
And that is how these people have been settled in and have a variety of other issues to deal with. So this is one aspect about the immigration part of it. Now, this is not the only aspect. The other aspect which is associated with is a form of warfare which has been conducted. It is a form of urban warfare which has been conducted. We've seen the first glimpse of that, which was building up to that in Delhi, in the Delhi riots.
Right.
And that was conducted in Delhi, but it wasn't just in Delhi, it was all over India. Right. At places where they needed to show that they can project power, right, within the neighborhood. And along with being able to project power, they did it in areas where there was an opposition government in place who would be able to provide them with an aegis, except for Madhya Pradesh, because there they do not have an opposition government, but they still went ahead and did it. However, I feel that as warfare goes, this was something premature, and I have my own mind-sweeping theory behind it.
Right.
So, did that answer your question?
Yep, it did.
अभी आपने बहुत अच्छे से explain किया everything behind it, the mindset and why we should call it more than just illegal immigration, basically, because there is a strategy and there is some goal to achieve.
Absolutely.
So, yeah. So, जो मेरा second question है, क्योंकि अभी हमने रोहिंग्या के बारे में काफी बात की है, and we know कि रोहिंग्या जो कि बांग्लादेश में भी है, उनको भी एक आइलैंड के ऊपर रखा गया है, भाषण 4 नाम है उस आइलैंड का स्पेसिफिकली, क्योंकि बांग्लादेशी गवर्नमेंट ने भी ये सोचा कहीं ना कहीं कि दे आर नॉट रेडी टू लिव अमंग द सिविलियंस ऑफ बांग्लादेश. सो इट इज तो जब बांग्लादेश भी रेडी नहीं है इनको अभी सिविलियंस के बीच में रखने के लिए, वहां पे हम ये देख रहे हैं कि इंडिया में, हिंदुस्तान में गवर्नमेंट ऑफ इंडिया ने सुप्रीम कोर्ट में कहा था कि 40,000 तक इलीगल इमिग्रेंट रोहिंग्या से हमारे यहाँ पे आए हुए हैं. प्लस वी आर ऑल्सो सेइंग कि ये सिर्फ वेस्ट बंगाल में या असम में नहीं है, ये जम्मू में समहाउ मूव हो रहे हैं, जिसपे कि लोगों को काफी क्वेश्चन हो रहा है कि वाई जम्मू, क्या रीजन है. इनफैक्ट रिपोर्ट्स यहाँ तक है कि उनकी एक मार्केट बनी हुई है जहाँ पे उन्हें बहुत अच्छे से काम मिलता है, एंड दे लिव वेरी, मतलब दे गेट पैम्पर्ड ओवर देयर. सो इसके पीछे क्या, मतलब अगर कुछ है इसके पीछे जो हमें नहीं दिख रहा है, जो फैक्टर्स हैं, उसके बारे में आप कुछ हमें बता सकते हैं. कुड बी द पाकिस्तान आल्सो दे आर वर्किंग विद दीज इनके साथ, जो हमें समझ में नहीं आ रहा अभी.
देखिए, पहले बात तो ये है कि देयर वेरियस फैक्टर्स व्हिच यू हैव आस्क्ड एसेंशियली. एक, द एनिमिटी बिटवीन बांग्लादेशीज एंड रोहिंग्यास. उनके बीच तो एनिमिटी है क्योंकि बांग्लादेशी जो है वो लोग रोहिंग्यास को स्टैंड नहीं कर सकते हैं. क्यों? क्योंकि बांग्लादेशीज तो रोहिंग्या के बारे में कोई मतलब अच्छा रोजी आर्टिकल पढ़ के तो अपना ओपिनियन नहीं बनाया ना, उनको रहना पड़ा है उनके साथ उनका हिस्ट्री है काफी सालों का, मतलब सेंचुरीज हिस्ट्री है, तो उन्हें पता है कि वो किस तरह का डैमेज इन्फ्लिक्ट कर सकते हैं. इसीलिए उनका जो कैरेक्टर है उनसे वो लोग भली भांति वाकिफ है, तो वो लोग रोहिंग्या को नहीं लाना चाहते हैं क्योंकि दे आर एसेंशियली, मैं मिलिटेंट नहीं कह सकता हूँ, they have always lived outside of law by doing the illegal in a violent way. हर वक्त, मतलब उनका कंप्लीट हिस्ट्री में आप देख लो तो इंडिया में तो नहीं जानते, वहां पे आप किसका बात करो, इंडिया गवर्नमेंट ही तो था ना जो उनको सेटल करवाया था जम्मू में जाके. They facilitated a demographic warfare to happen. I mean, if the government is, जो उर्दू में कहते हैं ना, नामाकुल इस तरह का हो, तो फिर हम लोग क्या कह सकते हैं, हम लोग क्या बोलेंगे. तीसरा पॉइंट जो आपने कहा कि इनका जो एक फैसिलिटेटेड सेटलमेंट होता है, ये सिर्फ रोहिंग्या के लिए नहीं सेटलमेंट होता है, ये सेटलमेंट आपका रोहिंग्या के अलावा आपका जो बांग्लादेशीज आते हैं हर एक के लिए एक फैसिलिटेटेड सेटलमेंट होता है. और उनके लिए उनको किस इंडस्ट्री में अकोमोडेट किया जाए, किस तरह से ड्रग रनिंग चलता है उनके द्वारा, सिर्फ मैं रोहिंग्या की बात नहीं कर रहा हूँ, अदर प्लेसेस, तो वो अपने आप में एक बहुत बड़ा चैप्टर है. उतना बड़ा चैप्टर मैं खोलना नहीं चाहता हूँ. चौथा जो पॉइंट आपने इस वक्त नहीं खोलना चाहता हूँ, क्योंकि अगर उसके बारे में बात करने लगा तो 1-1.5 घंटा उसी में निकल जाएगा आराम से. चौथा पॉइंट जो आपने कहा, इसमें फैसिलिटेशन बाय आईएसआई. देखिए, आईएसआई पिक्चर में तभी से आ गया जब से शेख मुजीब वहां पे प्रधानमंत्री बने, तो उनको अनसीट करने वाले जो थे वो आईएसआई ट्रेंड या पाकिस्तान आर्मी ट्रेंड ही थे. आईएसआई हैज बीन वर्किंग विद रोहिंग्यास फॉर अ वेरी लॉन्ग टाइम because Rohingyas essentially look upon themselves as Pakistanis, right? So and ISI has been facilitating them, ISI has been arming them. It is through the arming which was done by the ISI is how the Rohingyas went and attacked the Tajmaka of the Burmese army. All right. Now ISI is the force. ISI along with money of another friendly country near about is being the money behind the Jamaat. The Jamaat, because Wahida Begum has been subdued by Sheikh Hasina. So the Jamaat has taken over the kind of an opposition's role. So they are converting Bangladesh into this uber Islamic state, right? And the Jamaat handles all the military aspect, how should I say, the mutinous military aspect in Bangladesh, because the Bangladeshi army and the intelligence is after them. They all come over to India because they have a very strong presence and a very strong network over here. I won't go into some of those issues because of where I stay, but they have a lot of resources over here, and now that you have brought the name of ISI, you realize now that where actually is all these things being hatched. It is being hatched at a level which is organizationally capable of doing it, and to have a variety of stage of warfare chalked out, to know that पहले A होगा, फिर B होगा, फिर C होगा, फिर D होगा. क्योंकि ये सिर्फ मतलब आपका यहाँ पे जहांगीरपुर का वायलेंस जो हुआ is not something which has happened in isolation. ये पूरा movement start हुआ काफी दिनों पहले. It started off with the Hijab movement, right? And if you look at the Hijab movement, what do you see from that? You find that the Hijab movement has very motivated soldiers working for it. They are girls who are willing to sacrifice their future. Now, when they're sacrificing, they would only be doing it on the basis of an organizational assurance at one level. At other level, they're doing it for a cause which they feel is greater than themselves. Because this has been enacted and worked out of the blue, right? To wrong foot, and there are various components. Why I call it a warfare? Because there are various components which are associated in various dimensions. One is an on-ground activity. Along with an on-ground activity, you have amplification forces, which is on ground. Along with those amplification forces, you have people who are press elements who will amplify it even further. After it's been amplified in the press element, then it is taken over and given an international hue. These, in this day and age of where every word which you put, you get paid for it, can't happen accidentally.
Right.
Especially when it is being pushed and portrayed, excuse me, so selectively, right? It can't be happening accidentally. So there's a basis behind it.
Right.
And the one who's chalking and planning these, the ones who are chalking and planning these out are way levels higher than the particular person whose name you mentioned. He's just a foot soldier.
Right.
He's a local organizer at the best, nothing more than that.
Right. Avita, actually, my next question was something you've already answered, but I'll nonetheless, want to still understand from you, is that, in a lot of your social media posts which went viral during these weeks itself, you already predicted this, that what was happening, whether that was Karoli, Rajasthan, whether that was Khargaon, Madhya Pradesh, whether that was Hubli, Karnataka, whether then Jahangirpuri, you said it's like a chain of events in which obviously these, illegal immigrants are now even infiltrators are used, but it's in coordination with where you are wanting the whole purpose is that it's an instigation. You want the reaction. You have the hostile foreign press ready along with their willing agents within.
No. I'll clarify this a little bit.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. See, for example, if you कहीं पे बारूद अगर आप गाड़ के रखे हो, ठीक है, और आपको पता चल गया कि वहां पे बारूद रखा हुआ है, कहानी पे आते हैं, ठीक है, आपने तो अलीबाबा का कहानी हर एक पढ़ा होगा, तो अलीबाबा में मर्जिना जब जाती है वो तेल के खोज में, तो जब वो तेल के खोज में जाती है तब उससे वहां पे वो बोला, वो ऑयल मर्चेंट आया हुआ था, वो उसने सोचा कि अगर मैं अब तेल कहाँ से खरीदने जाऊंगी, उसी इतने सारे बैरल्स रखे हुए हैं, उसमें से एक बैरल में से आई टेक अ पैन फुल ऑफ ऑयल, उसी से काम चला लेते हैं, किसको पता चलने वाला। तो वो जब निकालने जाती है तब उसे पता चलता है कि बैरल में कुछ और ही चीज है। अब वो जब जाके अलीबाबा को कहती है कि देखो मेरे हिसाब से मतलब ये मर्चेंट नहीं है, शायद कुछ और है, तो अलीबाबा तो उसका बात टाल देता है। वो कहता है कि अभी डिस्टर्ब मत करो, ये क्या किस तरह का कॉन्स्पिरेसी ले आई। तो वो बेचारी क्या करेगी, वो जाके फिर वो ऑयल उबाल के तो पहले तो पता तो लगा है कि किसके अंदर है, तो उसको जाके नॉक करना पड़ता है, ठीक है। नॉक करके पता चलता है कि भैया इसमें ये तेल का बैरल नहीं है, ये बैंडिट का बैरल। अगर किसी तरह से आपको अगर पता चल गया हो कि आपके यहाँ पे भी तेल का बैरल नहीं है मगर बैंडिट का बैरल है, तो आप उसके बारे में लोगों को किस तरह से इत्तलात करोगे कि भैया यहाँ पे जो है डेंजर है। मिलिट्री पार्लेंस में हम लोग क्या कहते हैं, इसे माइन कहते हैं, कि कहीं पे माइन दबा के रख दिया है, अगर टैंक वगैरह कोई आए तो वो माइन में विस्फोट होकर वो तबाह हो जाएगा। तो उसके लिए पहले इंजीनियर्स को भेजते हैं कि माइन कहाँ कहाँ है उसे मार्क करो। या फिर आपके पास कहीं पे एक फोर्स छुपी हुई हो, एम्बुश करने के लिए रेडी हो, तो एक फॉरवर्ड पार्टी भेजा जाता है कि जब एम्बुश करने वाले फॉरवर्ड पार्टी पे अगर फायर कर जाए तो पीछे वाले पार्टी को पता चल जाएगा कि वहां पे एम्बुश है, फिर वो लोग एम्बुश वाले जो एम्बुश कर रहे थे उनके ऊपर धावा बोल पाएंगे, ठीक है ना। तो मेरे हिसाब से यहाँ पे एटलीस्ट कुछ, जिसे आप राइट विंग कह लो या जो भी कह लो, उनको पता चल गया था या इंटेलिजेंस ऐसा आ गया था कि भैया यहाँ पे ऐसा चीज हुआ है। क्योंकि जिस तरह का तैयारी दिल्ली में देखे थे हम लोगों ने कि जहाँ पे पूरा आर्म्स एंड एमुनेशन, वेपन, किस तरह से ब्रिक बैट्स लगा हुआ है, that kind of preparation doesn't happen in isolation. Now the question is where all has this preparation happened? Now to instigate that, you have to first instigate that to show that there is something which is flammable over there. So how do you instigate that in India? You bring out a procession and a march. Now, if you bring out a procession and a march and you take it across the page, if it is volatile, it will turn violent. And if it turns violent, then you have marked where the violent place is. Instead of having something as big an explosion as the Delhi riots happening, there's something which you have to keep in mind. Violence, when it happens, is never an objective. Violence is a means to an objective. Right. The objective almost always is demographic depopulation. वो कश्मीर में वो जो 4-3K का वो जो ये निकला था ना, क्या बोलते हैं, convert or die, क्या बोलते हैं, leave, convert or die, right. So that is the formula which works. It's worked in Bangladesh, it's worked in Pakistan, it works wherever there is a concentration of Muslim populace staying over there, because after they have cleared off that place, then they convert that place into a ghetto. Once they have converted that place into ghetto, then all kind of gray activity can happen within which people will have no idea outside. Right. And gray activity helps facilitate gray economic activity. That gray economic activity gives money to then purchase political activity. That political activity will then provide you with leverage. So this is a chain of event which happens. So the first part of it is to depopulate a particular area so that people move out of that area, and only those people who can be believers or who will stick to the strictures will stay. Right. तो इन चीज को निकालने के लिए उन्होंने मतलब इंस्टिगेट किया. मेरे हिसाब से वो लोग थोड़ा प्रीमेच्योरली, क्योंकि इनके पास तो ऑब्जेक्टिव नहीं थे, क्योंकि उस वक्त कहानी भी रेडी नहीं था जो प्रेस में रिलीज होगा वगैरह. ये लोग तो टूट पड़े प्रोसेशंस पे और दिखा दिए कहाँ पे ये लोग ऑलरेडी सेटअप थे. So that is my theory of mind.
So Abhida, again, keeping with that question, which you spoke about, in the sense like, your social media posts had brilliantly analyzed that, that these, these communal flare-ups that were seen, the attacks that were seen on religious processions were coordinated. And the way it worked was that you had hostile foreign media who was waiting for a reaction. And once that reaction would come in, the whole thing would be twisted, the context would be taken out, the initial violence would not be shown, minority victimization then would be splattered across those sections of that global media which is anti-India, and they would have willing journalists here who would team up with them and paint this thing where it works for them, in the sense to work all the fault lines and then ultimately hope for communal clashes and basically put their analysis theories in that the community, minority communities are in danger here. So you said all this works in sync. So if you could just again explain, how did you come to this analysis, and how does this whole industry work, where there are foot soldiers within media, then there are foot soldiers like Ansar, and at the top that post many layers you have the actual master.
Okay, so one of the things which I didn't actually say was that, per me, I feel that this time around, at least the whole milieu of industry weren't prepared. I mean, the foot soldiers, the media foot soldiers and all those were not prepared. I feel that this was triggered prematurely. I feel it was triggered purposefully, which is why I call it a mind-sweeping operation, in the sense that they took out these processions, and by taking out the processions, they triggered the violence, because these people were already prepared to visit violence.
Okay.
This time they didn't have a narrative ready like they had a narrative ready during the Delhi riots, nor was the visitation of violence as widespread as it was during the Delhi riots. But these places were already primed and prepared, and these were primed and prepared on a completely national level.
Okay.
The components were that, wherever there was this kind, because you don't, at least to the best I'm aware, there weren't any orchestrated manner by which any kind of an assault happened on any mosque. The best they could share was some people trying to put on one saffron jhanda on the gates of one mosque. Right. So that's one incident. However, there were at least 20 incidents all over India whereby these processions were attacked in a very organized way.
Right.
So I feel that it was a little premature, and because it was premature, it was not something that they had planned out completely. But the other side, which is the Hindu right, were able to instigate these premature explosions to know where exactly and how these things have been organized and kept in place.
All right. Interesting.
अविका,
Amana, you can ask.
हाँ, सो जब हम बात करते हैं इलीगल इमिग्रेशंस की, अगर हम नंबर देखें तो 2004 के अंदर जो उस वक्त के यूनियन मिनिस्टर ऑफ स्टेट और होम मिनिस्टर थे, मिस्टर जायसवाल, उन्होंने कहा था कि जो नंबर है वो 12 मिलियन तक हो सकते हैं। बाद में जो एनडीए गवर्नमेंट है उसमें जो किरण रिजिजू जी हैं, उन्होंने वो नंबर 2 करोड़ तक दिए। तो हम देखते हैं कि रिगार्डलेस किसकी गवर्नमेंट सेंटर में है, कौन मैनेज कर रहा है, ये जो प्रॉब्लम है वो कंटिन्यू है एंड इनफैक्ट नंबर बड़े ही होते जा रहे हैं, जिसको बोलते हैं स्थिति बद से बदतर होती जा रही है। तो ये भी क्वेश्चन उठता है कि हमारा सिस्टम भी तो कहीं फेल हो रहा है क्या? कहाँ पे हम फेल हो रहे हैं और इसके सॉल्यूशंस क्या हो सकते हैं?
देखिए, मैं ये नहीं कहूँगा कि सिस्टम फेल हो रहा है, मैं कहूँगा कि सिस्टम सबवर्ट किया जा रहा है। ठीक है। और सेकेंडली, सेंटर में जो कोई भी हो, सेंट्रल औहदे में काम करेगी, वो तो स्टेट लेवल पे काम नहीं कर पाएगी। और ये चीज जो हो रहा है वो, और एक बार आप किसी भी स्टेट के अंदर से घुस जाओ, घुसने के बाद आपको अगर वो मतलब वो पूरा लेप दिया ना, आधार का लेप दे दिया, फिर राशन कार्ड का लेप वगैरह दे दिया, देन यू बिकम एक्सेप्टेबल। और वो एक्सेप्टेबल हो जाने के बाद यू गो अराउंड मूविंग एंड are able to subvert democracy wherever you can be concentrated in. अब अगर देखोगे तो वो concentration बढ़ है केरला में। ठीक है। तो ये डेमोग्राफिक वॉरफेयर है, तो उसको वॉरफेयर के तौर से देखना पड़ेगा। उसके बारे में दो चीजें हैं। एक चीज है, there is something which the government can do, the central government can do, which the state government can negate quite a bit, and there is something which people who are normal people who are living over here can do or make themselves aware of, and on the basis of it they have to look at, you know, what legislation they can bring about and how aware they become as a community to know that, you know, whether this is acceptable at all, and is the subversion of their system acceptable to them.
Okay.
That's where the personal choice comes in.
Right.
But this is दो चीज कह सकता हूं मैं, this is something which has to be planned out very carefully. क्यों? क्योंकि आज को हम लोग जो श्रीलंका क्राइसिस देख रहे थे ना, that was the basis of that is again from the fear of demographic warfare.
Okay.
Again, this becomes a separate topic of discussion.
Right.
आपको क्या लगता है? Okay, go ahead.
Second part of it is that ये चीज is this is not something which is today restricted just to India. Okay, the danger of this militant Islamic demographic warfare is something which is also going to crop up in a big way in Europe, and somewhere down the line it will convert itself into more of a global question than what it is currently. So there are going to be a lot more concern, global concern will start getting focused on this issue. So I don't see it being restricted, but there's something which we'll have to think of in terms of, I mean, what happens if Kashmir file gets enacted in your locality? How will you deal with it? That is something which at a very basic level, everybody will have to start thinking about.
Right. आपको लगता है एनआरसी इसका एक सोल्यूशन हो सकता है? एंड प्लस व्हेन वी टॉक अबाउट दिस इलीगल इमिग्रेशन, तो हम अगर यूएस को भी देखें तो यूएस डज वर्क अ लॉट अबाउट दिस सिचुएशन, बॉर्डर पे और बाकी सारे उसकी पॉलिसीज काफ़ी स्ट्रॉन्ग रहती है, स्टिल दे हैव दिस प्रॉब्लम। सो इंडिया की पॉलिसीज भी क्या उस तरह से वर्क करती है? क्या हमारे पास उतनी अच्छी फ्रेमवर्क है? क्या हमारे बॉर्डर पे प्रॉपर स्ट्रैटेजी अप्लाई होती है? एंड क्या एनआरसी का एक सोल्यूशन हो सकता है?
देखिए, एनआरसी पे मैं टिप्पणी कर नहीं पाऊंगा क्योंकि आई थिंक somebody who is legally qualified should ideally be able to comment on it. I'm not
Right.
legally qualified to be able to make a statement on that. But there's nothing which can beat an awareness, a national awareness. You know, we can't even define ourselves as to what being Indian means to us. Right, that's a very यहाँ पे what people play around with this a very nebulous idea of India. Okay, and that of India is supposed to represent it's like multimedia, it represents variety of things to variety of people. But we have definable systems within us, those systems of which we are basking in the privileges which those systems offer. And we have a way of life which we are living. That is also definable. Do we want to sustain that way of life, or do we are okay with letting go of that way of life? And how do we define ourselves as an Indian? Okay, those are things which at a very level is questions which we should be asking, and we should through that trying to find out a definition within our own mind by which we can act. One idea of the idea of India is that idea of a secular India. But if the idea of secular India brings us to this point, then is that idea working for us? Is a question which I have, which I find myself torn on these days. I had never liked to identify myself with my religion. My religion was something which is something I was in some ways very nebulous, but it was an identity which I never resorted to, because I always had that idea that, okay, fine, we are Indian. So irrespective of whatever your belief system is, however you live your life, we are Indian. But my idea of what Indian is could be very different from somebody else's idea of what Indian is. Because it's definitely very different from any of these guys who have come and settled in over here. Because to them, being Indian means just having that Aadhaar card. They don't have any allegiance towards the land. Right. Now, if the system gives me the same kind of weightage as that other guy, then what is being Indian?
Absolutely. Right. I think that's, Avida, that's a very, very powerful civilizational food for thought that you've put in here. And with that thought,
can I just interject over here, because you have used a very interesting word. Okay, right. and that word is something which defines this very warfare. You know, the thing is that we are living the best warfare, whichever we are aware of, is the political warfare or the democratic warfare. And that democratic warfare is a very finite warfare. It has a very small time loop, and its time horizon is only 5 years.
Right.
So everything which we think of is in terms of that 5 year. ये 5 साल अगर पार कर लिए तो नेक्स्ट 5 साल देखेंगे, अगर नेक्स्ट 5 साल में अगर पार नहीं कर पाए तो उस वक्त डूब गए, तो उसके बाद वाला 5वां साल में हम लोग कैसे उठेंगे, वही फोकस रहता है हम लोग, हमारे सिस्टम का, the Indian system.
Absolutely.
But the ones who are acting out the demographic warfare, they are looking upon it as civilization warfare, and for them it is an infinite game. Demography is a finite game.
Right.
But the ones who are conducting warfare on it are people who believe in an infinite game. So they are seeing it over horizons of centuries. Today there'll be 10%, tomorrow there'll be 15%, there'll be 20%, etc. They are looking in terms of percentage and what that percentage will entail for us, how we will secure them economically. इतना सोच ये demographic warfare वालों के पास नहीं है. Sorry, democratic warfare वालों के पास नहीं है. मगर जो demographic warfare कर रहे हैं on the democratic warfare, they are thinking in terms of centuries and working upon it. So are we at all equipped to be think in terms of civilizational warfare and how to defend ourselves, or do we have any kind of a standing or an idea of what civilizational warfare is, something which we'll have to introspect for ourselves?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, I think on that note, we would like to say a big thank you
Khalid,
from
I want
you.
to add something here.
Yeah, sure.
I think we should also talk about Hamid Dalwai, the way he explained what happened with Muslims intellectuals, especially elite of India, Indian Muslims.
Right.
They paint this entire thing when we talk about the infiltration from Bangladesh or illegal immigration. They paint it as atrocities on Muslims, of Indian Muslims.
Right.
Mindset need to be discussed now, because what happened कि we don't see how these people also poses a threat to Indian Muslim act itself. जब इनके
Right.
लिंक अगर पाए जाते हैं किसी भी ISI एजेंट से हो, या इवन इनके नाम भी आए हुए हैं टेरर अटैक में, first you bear that burden on yourself, then you are also victim of that attack. So we
Absolutely.
have to work on Indian Muslims mindset also, because elite तो ये काम कर लेते हैं, बट ग्राउंड पे आई हैव ऑल्सो सीन, जैसे मैं जहाँ रहती थी उसके कोने में एक बांग्लादेशी बस्ती थी मुस्लिम्स की, तो इट्स नॉट कि लोकली भी वो बहुत ज़्यादा इंटरमिंगल हो जाते हैं लोकल पॉपुलेशन से इंडियन मुस्लिम्स के, तो वो अपनी एक गेटो बना के अपनी रखते हैं, वो भी अलग। तो उन चीज़ों को इंडियन जो मुस्लिम्स हैं अगर वो इन बातों को समझ पाए कि हाउ इट इज़ अ वेरी थ्रेट टू इंडिया, दे कैन हेल्प स्टेट अ लॉट instead of seeing it as a part of themselves, and if there is any मतलब कुछ भी होता है उनके ऊपर एक्शन लिया जाता है जो कि बहुत सही एक्शंस भी हैं, तो भी उसको ऐसे परसीव करते हैं जैसे कि हमारे साथ ऐसा हो रहा है। तो ये भी एक, आई थिंक दिस शुड बी आल्सो डिस्कस्ड।
आमना इस पे
आपने बहुत अच्छी, सॉरी अविदा, जस्ट वांट टू ऐड, आमना आपने बहुत अच्छी बात कही, क्योंकि अभी जो मैं जब रिसर्च कर रहा था टॉपिक पे, तो जहांगीरपुरी के जो इंडियन मुस्लिम्स हैं उन तक ने कहा है कि अगर हम अंसर की बात ले, जो फुट सोल्जर्स का लिंचपिन है, कि उसकी फैमिली भी इंटरेक्शन ज्यादा नहीं रखती थी वहां से, और जो बाहर के रिलीजियस क्लर्जी हैं उनको वो होस्ट करते थे। और फिर जो स्वराज की रिपोर्ट थी कि ईस्ट मिदनापुर बंगाल से उसकी वाइफ के लिंक्स निकले हैं, क्राइम ब्रांच वहां गया है। और एक इंटरेस्टिंग एनेक्डोट मैं शेयर करना चाहूंगा। कई साल पहले व्हेन आई वाज गिवन अ टूर ऑफ JNU बाय दिस, आई वुड नेम द वुमन, शी वाज वेरी वार्म, शी showed me around the entire JNU. She was from Assam, Assamese Muslim, of course left leaning, but she too told me, because Assamese Muslims जो indigenous है उन तक को इतना ये problem हुआ है with the infiltration, they're like, we are in the most tough spot, because we these guys are not something which we can relate to, and mostly it's the criminal elements with the invasion mindset. So वो भी बहुत important है समझना इंडियन मुस्लिम को, कि एक तो ये क्रिमिनलिटी करेंगे, ये इन्वेजन करेंगे, इनके लिंक्स होंगे, दे विल वर्क विद द एंटी नेशनल फोर्सेस, लेकिन एंड में जब वो क्लैश ऑफ सिविलाइजेशंस होगा आप खोएंगे। या अभी आप ऐड कीजिए।
मैं आमना जो कह रही थी उस पे एक चीज बताना चाहता हूँ। देखो, आप जिनको इंटेलेक्चुअल समझ रहे हो, तो आप जब उनको इंटेलेक्चुअल का औहदा देते हो तो ये सोच के देते हो कि वो शायद इंडिपेंडेंट माइंड थिंकर है, मगर वो अगर इस पूरा वॉरफेयर का एक सोल्जर है तो वो तो अपना मतलब किरदार अदा कर रहा है। He or she is playing out the role which is demanded for that particular spot of warfare. He or she might have a patina of being an intellectual, but can only mouth what the warfare demands.
जी, चेस के मोहरे,
I would say एक तरह से कह सकते हो, right? Second thing I would like to say is that, look, I personally know a number of these Bangladeshis who have come over there. Now, some of them are very hardworking. I wouldn't like to use a very wide brush to paint all of them that. Those who have come for economic purpose and who are truly working, their heart out to make themselves a better. I would say that, okay, fine, as the bigger country in this neighborhood, we should bear some of the burden. But as long as it is an economic reason which is driving them, and they themselves can become productive members, economic members of this society, but you have to first ensure that they are a part of this society and they are not being being nurtured in ghettos,
Right.
where their mindset, they are not being controlled by a separate agency.
Right.
Right.
True.
So it is the agency which I am against. It's not that this particular migration which is happening that I'm against them. I don't want to club and say that all of these Bangladeshi immigrants are bad. No, that's definitely not the case. But most of them are controlled, and they'll be doing something which, they'll be doing at the behest of their controllers. They won't be doing it at the behest of what their individual conscience might be saying. And that makes them very dangerous.
कविता, बट ये भी क्वेश्चन आता है कि व्हाट वी आर डिस्कसिंग राइट नाउ, कि अगर वो इंडिविजुअली आते हैं इकोनॉमिक कंडीशन की वजह से, बट फॉर दैट देयर शुड बी अ प्रॉपर रूट. इफ वी कैन आल्सो थिंक अबाउट इट, द वर्क वीजा और समथिंग.
वो देखो, हमारा सिर्फ नेपाल के साथ ही अंडरस्टैंडिंग है, नेपाल के अलावा और किसी कंट्री के साथ ही अंडरस्टैंडिंग.
बट जब ये इलीगल इमिग्रेशन होता है तो फिनेंशियल रीजन भी कई बार होते हैं ऐसे कि इफ दे इवन डोंट वांट टू डू समथिंग इलीगल, उनके पास और कोई ऑप्शंस नहीं होते हैं. तो
एग्जैक्टली दैट इज व्हाट आई एम सेइंग. मतलब दैट इज व्हाट वे दैट्स वेयर स्क्रूटिनी इज रिक्वायर्ड.
Okay, I think we've had a lot of things to think about, and we've got a lot of incisive observations from Avida, and then later Amana also added. So Amana, since you've given a very, very insightful observation, I would want you to end it with a message to India and then to Indian Muslims, and then you can wrap it up.
इंडिया को मैं सिर्फ यही एक मैसेज देना चाहती हूँ. आई डू अंडरस्टैंड द आइडिया ऑफ ह्यूमन राइट. आई डू अंडरस्टैंड कि वी नीड टू थिंक एज अ इंडिविजुअल. आई अंडरस्टैंड दैट, बट यू ऑल्सो हैव टू अंडरस्टैंड कि वेयर बैलेंस लाइज, राइट. एवरी इफ दिस कंट्रीज आर होम, वी हैव टू मेक श्योर कि हमारा घर सेफ रहे, तभी हम उस घर में बाकी लोगों को भी आश्रय दे सकते हैं. तो किसी को आश्रय देना, मदद करना गलत बात नहीं है, बट प्रॉपर चैनल, प्रॉपर पॉलिसी के तहत जो हमारी स्टेट डिसाइड करेगी उस वे में हमें लोगों की मदद करनी है. अगर इलीगल इमिग्रेशन होते हैं, कहीं जगह पे गेटोइजेशन होता है, हिस्ट्री रही है, ये एविडेंस रहे हैं कि कई बार उन लोगों ने टेरर अटैक तक में पार्टिसिपेट किया है. तो एज ए नेशन वी हैव टू थिंक अबाउट आवर सिक्योरिटी एज वेल, हमारे लोगों की सुरक्षा. और जब हम हमारे लोगों की सुरक्षा की बात करते हैं तो इट इंक्लूड एवरी सिटीजन रिगार्डलेस ऑफ रिलीजन. वी शुड नॉट मेक इट अबाउट हिंदू एंड मुस्लिम. वो जब टेरर अटैक होता है तो उसमें हिंदू भी मरता है और मुस्लिम भी मरता है, वो देख करके नहीं किसी की जान लेता है. तो ये जो सिक्योरिटी जो हमारे देश की है, इसको सबसे ऊपर रखना, अपनी इंडियन आइडेंटिटी को अपने रिलीजियस आइडेंटिटी से ऊपर रखना, ये इंडियन मुस्लिम को बहुत सीखने की जरूरत है. अगर हम इलीगल इमिग्रेशन की बात कर रहे हैं, इट इज नॉट अबाउट योर आइडेंटिटी एंड दैट फियर कि इफ देयर वुड बी एनी एक्शन टेकन अगेंस्ट दीज दिस एलिमेंट्स तो हमारे ऊपर होगा. ये फियर डिस्कस करने की जरूरत है, क्योंकि ये फियर मैं बहुत ज्यादा देखती हूँ कि ट्रांसलेट कर लिया जाता है कि आपके साथ कुछ होगा. और जो लोग ये चीज करते हैं, जैसे अविदा ने कहा, वो चेस का मोहरा होते हैं जो अपना काम कर रहे होते हैं. तो ये फियर डिस्कस करना पड़ेगा और हमें ये बात समझनी पड़ेगी कि इंडिया कोई ऐसा कंट्री नहीं है. वी आर डेमोक्रेटिक नेशन, फंक्शनल नेशन. तो जब हम इलीगल एलिमेंट्स के ऊपर भी जब हम करेंगे ना एक्शन, वो भी प्रॉपर प्रोसेस से होगा. कोई उनको उठा के ऐसे जेल में नहीं डाल दिया जाएगा या कुछ उनके साथ अमानवीय व्यवहार नहीं होगा. वो पूरा प्रोसेस होगा कि किस तरह से इस चीज को टैकल किया जाए. तो ये सारी चीजें समझाने की जरूरत है कॉमन इंडियन सिटीजन को, मुझे लगता है. एंड हमें पॉलिसी फ्रेमवर्क पे भी बहुत काम करने की ज़रूरत है, क्योंकि जब मैं थिंक टैंक पे काम कर रही थी तो मैंने देखा कि इवन बांग्लादेश का जो बहुत सारे इमिग्रेशंस के पॉलिसी फ्रेम है वो बहुत अच्छे बने हुए हैं. इंडिया को ज़्यादा काम करने की ज़रूरत है. एंड ऑफ कोर्स हमारा जो कंट्री है उसमें बहुत कुछ देखना पड़ता है, तो इट गेट्स लॉट ऑफ वर्क जो है वो, आई डोंट नो पीएमओ पे क्या क्या बहुत सारे अदर रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटीज भी होती है, बट वी नीड टू टेकल एवरी एस्पेक्ट ऑफ इट. तो दैट्स इट, यही मैं मैसेज देना चाहूँगी. एंड थैंक यू फॉर वॉचिंग द इंडिया दिस वीक. अगर आपको आज का हमारा शो पसंद आया तो प्लीज़ कमेंट कीजिए. कोई क्वेश्चंस हैं तो वो भी आप वहाँ पे लिख सकते हैं. एंड नेक्स्ट क्या एपिसोड आप चाहेंगे कि हम डिस्कस करें, उसके बारे में भी कमेंट कीजिए. एंड प्लीज़ लाइक, सब्सक्राइब और शेयर करना ना भूलें. धन्यवाद.
थैंक यू.
Thank you.